So we shall start. As we have seen from the previous presentation, the topic of creativity and creative communities is quite the issue nowadays in social sciences, and network analysis is not the exception. So, but still there is a lot of to be discovered, and that's why we wanted to make a brief description of what studies of networks in art sphere are being implicated to see what is to be done. And firstly, we discovered that the main topic in these studies is the market structure and the structure of the field itself, and it is implemented in the paradigm of cultural production. And this approach is rooted in two major works of this paradigm. This is the work of Bourdieu and Becker, and mainly the authors, they introduced the terminology that inspired their network followers, and they developed it. So, for example, Bourdieu introduced the idea of a field as objective structure and a position that depends on the capital that an agent has. And Bourdieu concentrated his interest on the conventions, on the interaction between agents, and how these conventions can help or can constrain agents' work. And that's why we wanted to look which are the areas of network analysis in art sphere are implicated because of this paradigm. And the first area is the great amount of studies dedicated to the question how the art sphere is structured. And here we can say that artistic creativity is chain of cooperation, and it is influenced by the networks that are inside of this field, and these networks can be mediated by different intermediaries. For example, such as art events, art spaces, or artworks. Art events and art spaces, such as art festivals, art fairs, or art galleries, can be the platforms for meeting agents each other and for uniting the social networks and and structuring their positions within this field. And artwork also can influence the networks of agents because of the difference of the material characteristics, and that's why the networks can also be different of different artworks. The other area of studies is dedicated to the topic of artistic careers or trajectories within the art field or art world. And here we can see a beautiful picture made by Geoffrey in 1999, and it is visualizing how a career can be a movement in a network through the time. So while one agent change its position in a network, the network also transforms, of course, in other positions, also mixes up. And studies that are made in this subject area, also questions how different positions which benefits and constraints they have. For example, core periphery effect of it. We can say that agents in the core are more powerful and have many resources, but they have no new ideas. Agents in the periphery have, on the contrary, only new ideas but no resources, and those who bound them, those who are in between, are in a very good position because they can have the resources and the ideas from both sides. And the other area of studies is dedicated to the accounting for what is innovation in cultural field and how can it be diffused and done in this sphere. And here the small world term is one of the central ones. It describes how a small world, a very dense cluster with short ties, can be very good from the perspective of trust in this cluster and from the perspective of very fast diffusion of knowledge and information. But from the other hand, it makes this knowledge very homogeneous, and it make different clusters depend on gatekeepers, and gatekeepers are those very interesting positions that can say who can be a part of a filter, who cannot, who can choose between different types of agents and unite different clusters. And as far as we can see, there are a lot of issues, mostly of micro-organizational level and made in cultural production paradigm in network analysis in arts, but still there are many things to discover on, for example, a team level. What is interaction inside of this team? How it can be caught by network analysis methods, and that is why we're thinking about this research gap that exists on both subject and methodological levels. And of course there are some works, but there are few works on this topic, and they are not dedicated to the question how the knowledge and meaning can be diffused and can be created in these small teams. And that's why we wanted to use mixed methodology, both qualitative methods like ethnography and network analysis, on which Artem will further say.
Thank you. So you can see here two types of networks. Here on the upper left side, you can see the typical social network. And under this type of network, you can see a typical semantic network. Semantic network is a method of visualizing a text. What is different here is that semantic networks do not represent kinds of categories or kind of very abstract structure. They represent the very content of a text. And if we try to study these separately, it's very difficult because these large semantic networks are very, very difficult to understand, to gain any idea from a visualization. So what we propose is using a two-mode and two-level socio-semantic network, which consists of a different approach to making a semantic network and coupling it with a social network. And on the right, you can see that we will have connections between individuals or actors, and we will have connections between concepts in the same network. But how to visualize this kind of two-mode network? Because if we try conventional methods, we will have the picture which is very similar to that one which was shown on the first slide, like this big cloud of words, which doesn't make any sense. We apply pivot MDS technique for visualizing two-mode network, and we can see that it gives a quite different result. We have three key actors in the corners of this triangle. They are defined by the amount of text produced. So we have the largest amount of text produced for these three people, and we can see it clearly on the picture. Next, we can see the different kinds of groups of concepts which are placed either between two people or behind them or in the center. Well, there are some people in the center as well, and we call these followers because they have less discourse produced than those in the corners who we call discourse generators. We can, of course, compute some basic network measures for these networks, but first we have to subtract these groups of concepts, like those between two actors or those which which are clustered around one actor. And then we will see different kind of approach, and we will get a different insight from the formal data. So what does a individual band looks like? It represents concepts which are shared by one of the actors and some actors from the core of the network. And here you can see this. These are semantic ties between concepts, and well, you have to take a little more steps to produce such kind of a picture, but this is something to analyze later.
Just a short thing to add. What we see in these blue bands of concepts are the concepts shared by one of the discourse generators with the actors which are grouped in the center, so-called followers, but not with other discourse generators at the same time. So
yes.
We can contrast between different semantic networks of different subgroups within communities this way. And and further, Artem will explain about other bands we see in the visualization. So they represent different combinations of actors of the group.
Yeah, so basically you can see what is peculiar to the chosen leader or knowledge or discourse generator of a group, and then compare what is specific to two of them and what is specific to three of them, and so on. So a band sharing concepts of two discourse generators and somebody else looks like this. It has more concepts and more ties. And the largest network of these is this one, which represents concepts which are shared by all three discourse generators and somebody else. So we can see that there is really a common ground between these three people. And well, to try to understand what is there, we can select top 20 concepts, and we will see that they are quite well abstract, or they deal with something particular, or like in this case, they are really connected to the art field. So this is the example of a community, what is to be done. And well, to start analyzing it, I propose that we look at the tables which consist of formal measures computed on these different bands. So we see here that the individual networks, which are taken well, not from this bigger visualization, but from the previous stage of producing data, they are quite different. And well, I have to say something about the context of this community. It consists of 9 members. Its an acknowledged leader is Velensky, who is designated here by 2 first letters of his surname, and it is largely theoretically and philosophically focused. Well, this may explain that there are so many texts produced. We see here that the formal leader has the strongest communicative ties with other members of community, but at the same time he has the least amount of concepts produced from all the text he got. Another member, Skidan, is different in a way that he has the biggest amount of concepts, and he has a relatively smaller communication tie strength. How does this reflect the community dynamics. We should look at the lower table, and we see that the band which well, on this picture is situated here between Magum and Skidan.
Just go forward one step and you will have this. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it
the
has
green one in between.
This green band has the biggest amount of between centralization, which is a measure which allows us to understand how the semantic network is focused, or if it is not focused at all on some kind of ideas or concepts. And well, there is another important thing to say here. In order to account for the differences between amounts of texts which we take, and which are also reflected by the measures which we compute on the networks, we should compare measures which we got to the random network measures. So we take the amount of concepts and amount of ties for a given network and compute a random network with the same amount of concepts and ties and see which centralization measure it has. So we can see that all networks which we were analyzing have quite large change compared to the statistically average random network. So these changes are not these changes are significant. And in case of the band between these two people, Magum and Skidan, the change is very dramatically high than for bands between two other members of the community. This reflects the idea that these two members have most in common in terms of ideas and shared concepts. On the other hand, the other two pairs of people are less successful in developing a really centralized discourse or semantic network. So we can see here that Skidan's role is to focus discussion on something, and at the same time the formal leader's role is not so evident here, because his networks are significantly lower in amount of centralization produced. So this is the outcome we can have from the examination of formal measures. So we should go on to another community. Well, yeah, we can, before that, we can see this network, which is really dense and large, and compare it to another one, which is like an average network you have seen for an individual band.
Yeah, just a short remark. The first one was with Skidan, and this is the one without him.
Yes.
So he really adds to complexity.
So another community, Parasite. Well, we have here a similar structure. Well, we have here a similar problem that some members of the community are more influential than others. This community is the largest among those analyzed, and there are 14 members. There are young members as well as old members who are communicating intensively between each other and influencing each other. Well, you can see here that on the picture they are trying to stand in the circle, so they appear to be equal, but if we analyze their semantic networks, we can see that this is not the case, and some are more influential than the others. Well, first you can look at the bands, well, which we of course selected based on almost the same method we applied to the what is to be done community. And if you look at these two bands in the middle, you can see that, well, the one, Koizin plus Petukhov plus Panin, this band is without Tuzov. So we kind of assess the role Tuzov, one of the really communicatively strong members of the community, and he's the young one. So what is his role in this inter-member collaboration? The change in between centralization for our network is the biggest, and there is another member, Petukhov, who is the least communicatively tied to other members. He is also a young guy, and on the other network, which is without him, the only one without him, we can see that centralization falls dramatically, and thus we can conclude that despite his Petukhov's lack of very high level of communication in the community,
Low.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So lack of high and that is low level of communication in the community. He is kind of a listener maybe, and when he participates in communication with others, he brings centralization and focus to the discussed ideas. And the other guy, Tuzov, who is really communicatively strong compared to Petukhov, he doesn't bring anything to communication, because we see that without him the band is more centralized than with him. And there is also another person.
We can compare between the two. Just to return one slide
yeah,
back.
Sorry. We can we can see the bands. This one, the more complex one, is without Tuzov, who is a really talkative guy, and this one is with him, but without this guy who is a listener. But there is also an old member, Koizin, and we can see that if we return to the table, that without him, the column on the right, the change in centralization is the lowest. So he's crucial to bringing focus and to integrating ideas for all other discourse generators. So we go on to another case, the community kitchen. Here we see their photos and their semantic network, which is shared by all two community leaders. It is relatively
And others
big.
as well.
Yeah, and others as well. What does it consist of? This is also something really relevant to the art field, and also something abstract. But here we have a different case because we have a formal leader, Chumak. He is on the right side. He's in the red corner, and yeah, here we have Brat, who is not a formal leader, but who competes strongly with Chumak. He is in the left blue corner.
Just a remark from the field. It was back in 2012 when we collected this data. So this is what we're showing. It refers to 2012.
So this is the impression that these two people make in us. You can see their networks. They are relatively, their bands. They are relatively similar to each other. We can see that Chumak's band has more centralization. It's there on the right. But if we examine the picture, it's less complex. It has probably less.
You can move it to make it a little to the next.
So this is Brat and this is Chumak. This is a less complex network, but if we read the concepts here, we can conclude that they are more abstract. They touch not on the particular issues, not on some technical problems, but they are more abstract, thus reflecting Čumāk's kind of a visionary nature. And Brat's case is different. He has more concepts, more ties, but the contents of this network is largely very, very particular, and it reflects his role as someone who cares about the process of producing art, who thinks about these practical problems, but doesn't have this, well, probably doesn't have this larger picture in his mind. So what is the result? The result is that Brat was excluded from the group. He had this conflict with almost any other members, and now he's absent. And
in which sense he's absent?
He's not a part of the
he's
group
out of the
anymore.
group.
Yeah, so
He's alive.
He's on his own now. He's now on his own. Yeah, this is not the death match.
This is the photo. The first one was initially in 2012 hanging in the community place, and this is the same one hanging there, but it has been transformed like this by the artists themselves.
Yes, so this kind of gives us an idea what costs you not having a bigger picture if you try to be a leader in the community. And another example, непокоренные, well, something about their context, very short. They are based in a common place. They have this this number of studios where they work, but they don't have a common idea, common ideology. They attract new members by granting them place to work, by granting them channels to distribute the artwork, and this is why they are relatively successful on the market. But they don't have this ideology. And here on the left you have this band which is which spans all three communicative discourse generators in the community. You see that there are almost no ties between concepts, and network between two people is even larger and has more ties than the network which we see for three of them. This is unusual because in other cases we see that there are much more, to a significant degree, more concepts when we look at the network composed of three actors and somebody else. And the networks for two people are significantly smaller in size and density. So you can see that if we take Parasite's network computed on the almost similar amount of text, it has much more connections, and maybe it has less concepts, but there are more connections. Thus, on the level of semantic network for непокоренные, we see this lack of common ideology which would unite them. Well, that's it, I guess. Thank you very much.